this is good. The light's right in my eyes. I can't really see anybody, so I can feel like I'm just talking to nobody. So I don't have a cool T-shirt, which that's a very cool T-shirt, but I did decide that since it's my first time back in California in over 30 years, I'm like, who does it better than Apple, right? And these guys are always wearing jeans, right? And they're doing cool stuff. I'm like, I'm going to wear jeans. I want to be like Apple. And if only, they did DevOps, right? We could just go get iDevOps, and then it would be really easy, and everyone could use it, and it would be user-friendly, right? And it would be perfect. So a little background on myself. I manage the teams right now that perform these DevOps types of chores. I've also inherited enterprise monitoring. I started off doing change management at Freedom Mortgage, and I'm in the process of driving our environments to the cloud. And so it's a hodgepodge of things. I am in operations, so I'm the ops side of the DevOps, and mostly because of the fact that that's where kind of delivery lives, right? And so the developers, right, they have a whole bunch of different tools and they have different ways of doing things, whereas in operations we tend to standardize, right? We tend to deliver things in one way, and so at least the way we do things, we figured, let's try to take that approach and see how it works. I only have a couple slides, and the way that we do a lot of our presentations, right, our CIO is very big on just, one slide, two slides, right? That's it. If you can't tell me in one deck, one slide deck, then your story needs to be fixed. And so I only have a couple of decks here, and so we'll go through them. But I do want to keep the theme. I always like to have a little bit of a theme. And so my theme is be an IT curmudgeon, right? So that's my approach, right? I want to be an IT curmudgeon. And by that I mean there's a lot of really cool things that people do, right? And I'm not going to tell you, for the most part, anything you probably haven't heard already, right, in different ways, shapes, or forms. But the way that I approach it and the way that I've succeeded to this point is that I don't look at it because it's cool, right? I don't address it, or I don't take the vantage point of, hey, let's do this because it's a cool thing, right? You have to marry all of this stuff together in what's good for the business, right? And that's why DevOps is different for different companies, right? Because what's good for me is not necessarily good for you. It may not be good for your neighbor. And in fact, even in the same industry, right, a financial industry space, those differ as well, right? So even if you're in the same vertical, it may not even make sense for them, right? Because you're at different points, right? And so for example, Freedom Mortgage is 6,000 plus odd employees, right? We're nationwide. There's only about 300 people in IT. Right? And that's a pretty small percentage in general, right, when you talk about companies. And that's inclusive, right? That's onshore, offshore, that's developers, that's QA, that's operations folks. That's a small team, right? And then it's a lot of hard work that goes into everything that we do and how we support. And so one of the drivers for us was we're killing people, right? We're working a lot, right? We're working weekends, we're working nights. And so if we don't want to, grow our IT by 50%, then we need to come up with ways that we can become more efficient. And so throughout my presentation, I'm going to call it a couple different applications. I'm not necessarily saying that they're going to work for everybody. It's the path that we've gone down, and so far it's working for us. So what we have here is we have our representation of our cloud environments. I have prod in kind of this dash box because we haven't gotten to prod yet, right? And that's, anyone who's obviously on this journey knows that is a huge undertaking, right? Once you get into production, there's so many more rules, right? There's so many more things you have to be careful about, and obviously the stakes get very, very high, right? If I make a mistake in dev, no big deal, right? I tear the environment down, maybe I rebuild it. If I make a mistake in test, right? Okay, no big deal. I wasted some cycles of QA time, but not a big deal. If I make a mistake in production, right, that is a big deal. So we're not in production yet. We have built out environments in dev test, and we're in the process of building out our UAT environment. And so most of this is being done right now in Amazon. And so these are our core non-critical business applications, right? And there's a good reason for that. And anyone who maybe in the financial space may have run across this as well. Our core application, our big system of record runs on AIX, and it runs on Power Processor, which do not equate well to the cloud, right? And so, in fact, and I'm not going to give them any shout outs yet if you want to talk to me later. So we found a company that can do this, right? And they say, hey, we can take your environments, these AIX Power PC environments, and put them in the cloud. And so we've been in talks and negotiations with them in doing it. But we sat down with Gartner, right? And we said, hey, Gartner, who does this, right? And they said, they do. How about anyone else? Nope. Anyone on the horizon? Nope. So really for us, there's one player in that space. And so as we're trying to work out how that is going to affect our environments, we've basically been taking a lot of these non-critical apps, and we have them out in Amazon now. You'll see along the bottom here, we integrate a lot of the things that some other folks have talked about today, right? We have regression testing that's automated. We script some of our functional testing as well. We do performance monitoring at both UAT and production. And then we have what we call daily health checks. And these are, again, automated checks, but they're more operational, right? They're not really around testing code per se. These are around just testing uptime, testing availability, testing response times. And again, these are scripted. They run, I'll say continuously. There is a lapse in between when they start, when they end, but they're scheduled to kick off every hour, and they run for about 45, 50 minutes. So for all intents and purposes, they are continuous, and they just kind of go through every system. They check everything from log in, log off. They follow certain transactions through the system. They're checking screen, where things appear on the screen, that kind of thing, right? So in case someone has, mysteriously deployed something without change management knowing it, right, we can catch it that way. And so, my journey really started from the change perspective and knowing that, hey, how do we get this stuff through the pipeline and into production? And, all that should be flowing through change management. And when I showed up at Freedom 2 years ago, it was very much like the Wild West, right? I mean, there was tumbleweeds and there were, showdowns in the street. Code was being committed in the middle of the day with no documentation. If there was an incident, maybe I'll get on, I don't know, right? And you get on the call and you say, okay, where's the WebSphere team? Well, what time is it? Well, it's 12:30. Oh, they're out to lunch. Okay, well, the system's down. Get them back from lunch, right? There's no lunch here, right? And it was a very different mindset for a lot of folks, right? Because, in operations, no one wants to hear that, right? It's 24/7, right? Someone had the chart of 9,999, the 1,000,009 availability, right? So there's no lunch, right? There's no sleep. There's no dinner. There's no Christmas, right? It doesn't exist. And so we had to come up with some models to alleviate, right, the pressure that we were putting on these folks, right? So we started going down the path of identifying, okay, how do we track changes? How do we commit these changes? And what we found was that we had to do a lot of retooling. And so in order to justify our DevOps journey, we had to really get a lot of metrics around how many incidents, right, how many failures are being caused by these changes, right, when people put stuff in. And so what we found was a fairly alarming number of incidents, right? And then a lot of calls and people getting up or in the middle of the day, right? Business being down. And when you deal with mortgages, it's not like the stock market or the trading floor. But if someone's going to closing today and they don't have their documents, that's a big deal, right? And in this world of social media and Twitter, right? 10, 15, 20 years ago, yeah, one person, if you piss one person off, big deal, right? Now that one person, man, they can blast you, right, on Facebook and Twitter, and before you know it, right, you're a trending topic, and, oh, your company sucks, and you don't know how to do this, right? So you have to be very careful with, the impact that you're making on production. So some of the continuous delivery best practice, and I just labeled them there, right? Things that we found out as we went through, right? How do we operationalize this, right? And these are kind of the do's and don'ts, but the things that I found were very useful and may make a lot of sense for you in your daily lives. So lead, don't reign, right? So I could have very easily, in my role as change management, said, thou shalt not, right? Yeah, nope, you're not going. Your change, you didn't meet all the criteria, right? I could put a whole bunch of bogus gates in place and said, you didn't meet the gates, so you can't go, right? But that's not realistic, right? We still had to operate a business because we're in the mortgage business, right? Unlike the ING, we're not in the IT business, right? We are a subset and we support the business. Although many of us believe, right, that without IT, none of these things would happen, right? And the farther we go down this line, everyone's acutely aware that without IT, probably all of our businesses would just go under, right? No company exists today in this digital age without IT. But you can't very well just say, right, you can't sit there in your ivory tower and say, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. So there had to be a lot of give and take. We had to come up and establish very specific rules, and so we started reining that back in. Part of that was about making the decisions fiscally responsible, right? And so I'm not the smartest guy on my team. In fact, I'm probably the dumbest guy on my team. But that's okay, because if I'm the smartest guy on any team, there's a big problem, right? I want all the smart people working for me, right? That way, I can come to places like this and then go to the beach at night, right? Like, I don't want to be working 24/7, right? I want to have people, smart people, handling these things, right? And people that I can depend on doing this stuff, right? So does it make sense, though, to do this from a financial perspective, right? And so, anyone out here, anyone who's an engineer or has engineers work for, everything's a great idea, right? This is cool, man. We should do this, right? We should go down this path, right? And this is why I'm saying be an IT curmudgeon, right? My first question is why? How much is that going to cost? Like, what do we gain? What's the benefit, right? And believe me, I love a lot of cool stuff. I mean, I have my toys too, right? I'm an IT guy from way back. I mean, I have, every gaming system back from the original Atari 2600. I mean, I love it all. But at some point, right, it has to meet the financial expectations of the organization, right? And you have to be fiscally responsible in those decisions. Automation breeds adoption, right? Anything I can automate for somebody, right? If I tell you that you don't have to wake up at midnight anymore to run that job when it fails, I'm pretty sure you're going to sign off on it, right? The sight unseen, I don't even have to explain the solution, right? All I have to do is say those magic words, and more than likely you're going to win, right? So anywhere that we can start to automate, and this went right into our regression testing and some of our functional scripting, right, around our testing, folks started to buy in. Another big thing here, and you'll notice, this is on purpose, right? All the clouds match because we wanted to make sure that non-production looked like production, right? So you fall into this trap, I think, sometimes where, people, they start to scale down, right? And now I'm not talking about horsepower, right? I'm not, if production needs 8 cores and 128 gigs of RAM, I certainly don't need 8 cores and 128 gigs of RAM in dev. But what I do need is I need similar data sets, right? And I need all of the pieces, right? I don't want to stub out my database, right? Why should I stub out the database? Provide the database, right? Give them something real to attach to. Now, there are financial implications to that as well, sure, right? Stubbing something out or, kind of making it a vague phantom call off into the ether may be cheaper. But at the end of the day, you want to push that pain as far to the left as possible, right? I don't want my integration points happening in UAT, right? Because if it's happening in UAT and I find a problem, right, I have to go all the way back to dev, right? And if I have any other environments in between there, like staging, for example, a P-1 break fix environment, right? I don't want to integrate there, right? Because that becomes costly and it's not time effective. So I want all that to happen in dev, right? And test at the latest, right? That's the latest where I want that to happen. But I can't do that if my environments don't look like production. And then quick wins lead to sustained victory. So this, this follows every paradigm out there, right? I don't want to tackle my most critical apps, right? I don't want to go into production and be like, hey, I can solve production problems, right? Start with those quick things, those quick wins, right? Automate something that has to happen at midnight, you know what I mean? This guy doesn't have to get up anymore, he's a fan, right? If this person doesn't have to build every server from scratch, right? And they can just kick off a script to build that server, right? I love you guys, you know what I mean? You're my new friends, right? So take those quick wins, attack the applications that make the most sense, right? Sure, everyone would love you if you tackled that app, right? Everyone has that app in their organization, right? The big monster app, the one that ties everything together, right? Or the one that generates the most money, or the one that provides the most bang for the buck. But if you start there, right, you're just setting yourself up for failure because you haven't learned the lessons yet, right? You haven't learned how to operationalize things. You haven't learned how to integrate, right? And so now everyone's sitting there waiting, right? And they're waiting for you to solve this big problem, and nothing happens, right? And it takes 6 months. Now it's a year. Now it's a year and a half, right? Now people are losing faith. Now they're wondering, did we make the right financial decision? And these are the tools. So we currently use a product by ZB Labs called Excel Release and Excel Deploy to help us with the pipeline. Now, we have not gotten to the point yet where we're kicking off every environment automated, right? We haven't gotten to the point yet where every single script is run every time I do a commit, right? A lot of these things are manual, so they're there, right? They exist, we just have to do them manually. Some of that's on purpose, right? Some of these things we want to continue to watch, right? We're not ready yet to turn them over to automation because of the sensitivity around them. But some of them are, right? Some of them we have been able to script just because of the routine nature of what they are and what they do. But these are the tools we went with and decided to use. And all we did was we wet the slide, right? So we just made things flow down the pipeline faster, right? And we're on our way to making them better. So impacting operational availability, right? This is where you kind of earn your marks, right? If you're an operations guy, and someone was saying it earlier today, right? It's got to be up. Everything's got to be functional. If it doesn't work, then you haven't really done anything for me, right? Or if you go to stick some crappy code in and you bring down the system, in fact, you haven't helped me. You've actually hurt me, right? You've done something adverse that I need to recover from. And so the top 3 applications, and I stripped some names out, and the actual number of incidents are indicated here. This was from January to September, and this is this year. And these were surprisingly the changes, right, and the things that we're pushing manually, right? And the drum roll, please, I guess you know what the bottom line is, right? So these are the ones that have been automated, right? So these are minimum, again, 50 changes. The top one, you can see there's a lot of incidents there. That application, we push hundreds of changes through. So, again, it's to scale to some extent, but, still, February, let's see, 19 incidents, 0 incidents. That's a pretty good story, right? Even if it's hundreds of changes, right? Again, these are all minimum of 50 changes per month. So it's not like I said, oh, we only did 1 change, we didn't have an incident. Hey, no big deal, we're awesome, right? No, we're pushing the right number of changes through, and we're seeing the success. And this is a slide that plays very well, right, to senior management, right? We have to get in front, because they don't know, right? Well, I don't know what this stuff is, right? This tells a very particular story because I can point to the applications and say, so yeah, those 19 incidents in February, right, and I can correlate data. That related to 100 hours of downtime, right? Those 100 hours of downtime in a customer-facing portal equates to, right, let me get my slide rule out here, right, X number of dollars. And that's when people really get excited. They go, oh my gosh, well, how do we fix this? I'm like, well, we have an automated method, right? And at that point, they don't even ask about the financials, right? They don't even care, because if they just lost $1 million, right, unless I say, hey, the solution's $1 million, right, then it doesn't matter to them, right? And they just want to get to this point. Building a secure pipeline. So one of the things that I think a lot of folks don't focus on, and I've talked to a lot of folks about this, is building the security in, right? So people, they see dev and they see ops, right? But they don't see sec, right? So it's not, it's not the DevSecOps handbook, right? It's DevOps. So a lot of people go, we'll add that in later, right? We'll come back to that, right? And QA is another part of that, right? So it's not the DevSecOps QA handbook, right? Again, it's just DevOps. So they say, well, let's focus on the development, let's operationalize it, right? And then we'll get there. But what we found in our journey was that, you know what? If we don't start addressing these things, again, right? If I'm going to go to UAT and I find a vulnerability because that's where I'm doing my scans, oh, that's a big deal, right? That's a pain in the butt to go back, and now I have to re-engineer that solution, right? So I need to start doing my scans and incorporating these security policies right out of the gate. So again, everyone loves lists, right? And so we do lists. So some of the things to look out for, locking down access to your automation deployment tools, right? So this is number one, right? If everyone can get to my tools, right, and anyone can deploy or schedule deployments, then I've lost control over that environment. Managing technical debt. So this is a big one, right? Technical debt piles up and piles up and piles up, right? I mean, we have systems, we just went through a patching cycle. We had some systems that hadn't been patched in over 4 years, right? That's a huge risk, right? There's hundreds of patches that we had skipped along the way. Enabling your audit capabilities on these tools, right? So you have to know who's going in, who's using them, what they're changing. Non-production access, just as important as production access. And I'll tell you, this is the case, I think, probably in more places than not. And you know, if they say you don't have to raise your hands, right? Because then you're going to implicate yourself here. But I guarantee you that there are folks here who have production data in their non-production environments, right? And so that production data that is just as important to protect against, right? And you know, and if you know, kind of looking around, you know, you don't have to shake your head or anything, but you know who you are, right? And we're guilty too, right? Everyone's guilty of that at some point along the way. Institute version control, right? Another no-brainer. Reviewing and archive audit logs. So this is what I found interesting. I was in SecOps many moons ago. And we would gather audit logs, right? People gather audit logs, right? And you go, oh, great. What are you doing? Hey, I satisfied my SOX audit point, right? Or I collect audit logs. What do you do with them? Oh, they sit over there, right? Okay, well, did you ever think about looking at them? Oh, I don't know, why? Should we? Yeah, definitely, right? That's the whole point, right? If I'm gathering this data and I'm not looking at what's happening, then I'm missing the boat, right? This goes along with access, right? So monitoring your non-production environments as well, right? Just for performance, if nothing else. And then building the security reviews into the build process, right? So one of the things that we didn't do in the beginning that we're doing now was we engaged security, right? SecOps right out of the gate, right? Take a look at this. Run your vulnerability scans, right? And now we're getting into the point where they're starting to automate that stuff, right? So, hey, automation's great, right? Everyone wants to automate. They want to be on board too because, again, it's cool for them, right? Like security is just as boring. Don't let them fool you. It's just as boring as everything else when you do it day in and day out, right? They still want cool things to challenge them as well, right? Because not everyone is out there doing intrusion detection, right? Not everyone is stopping hackers from, you know, busting through the front gates. Most security guys are doing exactly that, looking at log files and, you know, sitting eyes on monitor, right? Eyes on glass, so big deal, right? So give them something to be excited about as well, and then test, right? So if I had to take anything away here, the last thing would be this, right? Is always test what you're doing, right? You can't just shove stuff in there and not understand the ramifications of those changes. And then the last one here, again, I'm not a salesman or promoting any of these tools, but again, tying in your enterprise tools into this process can be just as important, right? So things from visibility, right? Dashboards, right? Executives love dashboards, right? I get to sit in front of the CIO all the time. Where's my dashboard, right? I told you in the beginning, they want one deck, right? Give me one page, one view. That's all I want to see, right? Boil that down. If you can't boil it down for me, then come back when you can. Configuration management, CMDB, huge, right? I got to track these items as they move through. Defect tracking, we're doing with Jira. Code commits with GitHub. Automation, we're using Selenium, but we also use UFT. And then monitoring, right? So App Dynamics is one of the tools we use, but we have others. We have SolarWinds, and we use things like TrueView, right? And getting single pane of glass on these things, right? So that I don't have to try to tie them all together. And then project management, right? Believe it or not, right? Project management's a huge thing, right? We get lost sometimes in the solution, right? Like, oh, this is really cool. I did all this awesome stuff, but I'm in the red, right? It took me way longer to do it than I should have. So tying those in, right? Getting automated reports, right? So our deployments now and our things as they go through the pipeline, we color code them, right? Is this release a green release? Is this amber? Is this red? Understanding where along the build are we coordinating with and tying into the project timelines. And I think I'm probably out of time.
We have a bit more time.
Oh, great. Awesome.
10 more minutes, including some questions.
10 more minutes? I know I should go back. I went through the thing so fast. Okay, I'll stay here and talk about some of these things and some of the things that we're doing. And you know, and again, I had to share this deck, right, with our senior management before I brought it here, right, because everyone's very concerned that I am going to apparently present something that will be earth-shattering and, you know, bring the mortgage industry to its knees. And you know, so I presented this, and they're like, "You are the cornerstone of our organization," right? And then on my way out here, my boss calls me and says, "Ting, we're cutting corners this week." So, it's a joke, cornerstone. Oh man, God, terrible, terrible. So, let me talk a little bit about our test automation tools. And so I know this morning someone was talking about Selenium. We also use UFT, which was formerly QTP. So if anyone remembers QTP from back in the day, a little different, right? Selenium definitely web-based. Everyone loves it for all their websites. We use UFT a lot from our Windows-based applications, right? Works very well there. But I can't stress enough, automation of your testing is huge in this space. And you guys who are living this and doing it, right? You know it. But it really can be the difference to your success, because you can do all this automation and it's great, right? And you go from one environment to the next environment. But if you're trying to be agile, right, and you're trying to be quick, right? What is the slowest process out there, right? Everyone knows, drum roll, right? It's QA, right? QA can take a long time, right? And especially if maybe you outsource it, maybe it's overseas. So hey, I guess my guy, they're going to test tonight, right? And then they come in tomorrow, and you're like, okay, what were the results? Oh yeah, VPN was down. We didn't test anything. Wait, what? What I mean? Like, wait a second. What happens? You didn't tell us? Well, we didn't think it was a big deal, right? So you just wasted a whole cycle in QA, right? And whether you have 50 test cases or 1,500 test cases, right? If it's a manual process, man, that is arduous, right? And it takes a long time. And if you don't have the test scenario set up, right, or you find out later, oh, the test data was wrong, right? Now there's more churn. So anywhere you can automate this testing is going to save you so much time, right? Because you can automate all the other stuff, but everywhere there's QAs involved, it's just going to slow things down, right? So you want to automate as much as possible. And then for us, from an operational perspective, one of the big things that we really had to learn how to do was tie this in with project management, right? So everyone's a project manager, right? You go out there, you look at their resumes, everyone's got project management on their resume. I can manage a project, right? And so I can too, right? It's great. Hey, you're late, that's it, You're off budget, get that down. But folks who do this for a living and are very good at it, right, have ways of reporting, right, and building out their project plans that you have to be able to tie into, right, because they have the voice on the everyday, regular basis with the business, right? Those are the people that are going back to the business on a regular basis saying, hey, you realize that the development's behind and it's this guy's fault, right? Well, wait a second, right? Those are not in charge of anybody, right? Most places, right? Your project managers don't have any control over me or that guy, right? But what they do have is the ear, right? They have the ear of the business, they have the ear of the project sponsor, and in fact, they have half a hand on the wallet, right? That's paying for the project. So tying in and making automated updates into your project software is huge, and this is something we just started doing, right? So we use a product called Workfront, which I don't know how popular it is or not, but it's web-based, and so tying into that, we're able to, as we make pushes, right? We have API calls that go in and update the status, right? Every time someone approves something, right? QA signs off, change management approves, right? It updates certain deliverables on the project schedule, right? And so they don't have to come back. Again, single pane of glass, right? Dashboard, right? I don't want to talk to anybody if I don't have to, right? As much as I'm a personable guy and I'll go shoot the breeze, we'll go have a drink. Like, I don't want to talk to you about work during work day, right? That's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? Right? Go out here, go to my dashboard, go out to my SharePoint site, go out to look in Tableau, right? All the information's there. All right, now, how can I help you? Right? And if you come to me and say, oh, I'm going to point you in that direction first, right? Because we spend a lot of time doing that. We spend a lot of time putting these things out there so that it's all in one place for someone to see. Any questions?